In this episode of Segaiden, Sega knows what North Americans love: shooting, both in outer space and on the ice.
That's a knife.
Unbelievably, December 1986's Great Ice Hockey would be the Master System's first sports release. Considering that the Sega Genesis's library would consist of about 90% sports titles by mass, it just goes to show, huh? As you'll soon see, Sega's Great series replaces the SG-1000's Champion series. That is, a line of sports games of wildly varying quality. Sega would be less consistent with its naming scheme on Master System than on the older console, with two sports titles appearing sans Great appellation alongside Great Ice Hockey. One thing you can count on though, everyone agrees that Great is a misnomer for this line. Great Ice Hockey has large shoes or skates to fill, following up on the delightful Champion Ice Hockey for SG-1000. Champion Ice Hockey succeeded on the strength of its pure, idiotic, kinetic chaos. Great Ice Hockey unfortunately trips up on Sega's decision to use it as a hook for selling a special controller. You can't play the game with the standard Sega Pad controller, even though the company didn't offer any sort of game and controller bundle. Hand in hand with Great Ice Hockey, we also have Sega's first standalone peripheral for the Master System, the Sega Sports Pad. At first glance, this would appear to be the Master System's equivalent of the Robot Operating Buddy for NES, with only 3 games that officially supported it, 2 of which were just reissues of earlier releases. Now you can't fault the idea behind the Sega Sports Pad, a rare trackball controller for a console. Atari had shipped trackballs for the 2600 and 5200, but as arcade games consolidated around joystick-style controls, the format became increasingly uncommon at home as well. In fact, the American Master System never saw any ports of classic trackball-style arcade titles like Centipede or Marble Madness. Europe did receive Marble Madness, but somehow the Sports Pad never shipped there, and it only appeared in Japan as a limited mail-in release that removed some of the American version's options, greatly reducing its utility to a single Mark III title. So the whole affair seems a little ill-considered, especially when you realize that Sega charged $60 for the Sports Pad on top of the cost of Great Ice Hockey itself. The game costing $40, that works out to $100 in late 80s bucks, which works out to be more than $250 in today's money. Sega counted on Americans really loving ice hockey, is what I'm saying, meaning that this was a product strategy clearly designed for the Canadian market. Unfortunately, I can't really weigh in on how well all of this worked out on the gameplay front because, well, we're talking about an 8-bit Sega peripheral here. Build quality didn't exactly rank as a top priority, and finding a sports pad in good working order now, in the year 2023, has proven to be a difficult task. The Sports Pad replaces the D-pad with a roller ball, which sits to the right of buttons 1 and 2. Above the buttons, the Sports Pad features 2 switches, one for auto-fire and one that allows you to alternate between sports and standard controls. The sports setting places the trackball into a full, analog-like mode, theoretically allowing for subtle, precise control. On an aging Sports Pad with failing input detection, however, the sports mode is, shall we say, less than perfect, which makes Great Ice Hockey quite difficult to play. So in a perfect world where all sports pads work perfectly forever, I think Great Ice Hockey might be reasonably fun to play. Its brisk, low-friction approach to hockey makes for a low-commitment experience in which an entire game plays out in less than 10 minutes, 3 minutes per each of the 3 periods, and it doesn't require much in the way of finesse. You roll the trackball to move a player around, and taking possession of the puck requires nothing more complex than making contact with the opponent currently in control. Pass with a button, switch automatically between active defending players, block shots into the net to push the puck back into play with a face-off. It's all very simple. However, it lacks the hilarious over-the-top physics of Champion Ice Hockey, the tactical team setup options of Nintendo's Ice Hockey, and the relentless speed of Konami's Blades of Steel. Of course, Champion Ice Hockey never came to the US, and Great Ice Hockey predates the NES hockey games by more than a year. So in terms of US console hockey titles, Sega basically had the entire genre to itself, provided you had deep enough pockets to buy in. That said, while Great Ice Hockey leaves a lot to be desired as a hockey title, this whole scenario didn't turn out to be a total loss. While the sports setting of the Sports Pad only worked with 3 games, The standard setting had considerably more versatility. This is the Sports Pad's saving grace. It theoretically works as a trackball with any game you like. This has no real value for most of the Master System library, of course. Playing through a platformer like Alex Kidd in Miracle World with a trackball would be a great stunt for awesome games done quick, yet it doesn't exactly resonate with appeal as your daily driver. But pick the right kind of game, and the Sports Pad rocks. For example, a shooter like Fantasy Zone plays great with the Sports Pad, offering players speed, precision, and the option to activate rapid autofire. Although not every shooter fits the bill, RAMBO is a disaster, the Sports Pad has a lot of potential. And that potential extends beyond the Master System itself, thanks to Sega's habit of using something akin to an industry-standard connector for its controllers. Not unlike the SG-1000's racing controllers, the Sports Pad would continue to offer compatibility even on Genesis, where Marble Madness did ship in the US. But Master System owners wouldn't have to wait that long to get more mileage from their spendy Sports Pad investment, because it turned out to be a perfect match for the very next game. Another vertical shooter arrives on Master System with Astro Warrior. Now, based on the box art, this would appear to be a game about blowing up pretzels, but no, actually, it's just a Star Force clone. This sort of game doesn't have a huge amount of traction in the US, probably because we largely missed out on its 8-bit heyday. While our peers in Japan were falling in love with vertical shooters in the mid-1980s, we were wading through bins of steeply discounted junk titles for Atari 2600, and wondering if good new games would ever show up in stores again. By the time new consoles emerged here in 1986, the likes of XEVIOUS and Star Force had already rooted themselves deep into Japanese arcade and console culture. Here, not so much, meaning that both Action Fighter and Astro Warrior arrived as part of the first proper wave of shooters at the end of 1986, along with 1942 for NES. Well appreciated, but ultimately a little too late to truly catch fire. As these releases go, Astro Warrior has the benefit of being the sole original console release, rather than an arcade port. It's probably also the least remarkable of these titles, at least mechanically, although it moves smoothly and features nicely colorful visuals and some tricky enemy patterns. But Astro Warrior ultimately comes off as a bit samey compared to the competition. On top of the games I mentioned previously, November 1986 saw a solid port of XEVIOUS arrive for 7800, and Konami made its NES debut in December with a shockingly good home conversion of GRADIUS. Astro Warrior falls directly in the middle of those two releases. Like XEVIOUS, it's a vertically scrolling shooter in which you need to take out both aerial and ground-based targets. Like GRADIUS, it has a power-up system that ultimately builds up to the player's vessel transforming into an engine of sheer destruction, including a pair of energy bits that trail around behind your fighter and duplicate your attacks. But it doesn't really have much to call its own, and it's alarmingly brief, consisting of a mere 3 stages that loop after less than 10 minutes and simply grow more difficult with each subsequent iteration. Unlike Action Fighter, which incorporated that interesting transformation effect and alternated between driving and flight, Astro Warrior simply doesn't stand out aside from the fact that a pure vertical shooter like this was such a novelty on US consoles at the time. To its credit, the auto-scroll shooting plays out differently across Astro Warrior and Action Fighter. The latter directly imitated XEVIOUS with its flight sequences, giving players a dual attack system with a targeting reticle to guide bomb strikes. Astro Warrior takes its cues, as I mentioned before, from Tekkon's Star Force, the next step in shooter evolution after XEVIOUS. It removes the alternate air-to-ground bomb feature, turning ground-based targets into objects that your standard forward cannon can blast away. The background cycles between empty gulfs of space and the surface of enemy installations, which has a material impact on the action. You have clear, uninhibited lines of fire in open space, while various barriers and destructible objects block or soak up your shots as you skim over the top of structures. Note that these obstacles only affect your forward fire. You can't actually crash into anything besides enemy fighters and projectiles. You simply need to keep object placement in mind as you gun for approaching attackers, since they can get in the way of taking out enemy targets. There's value in blasting all those boxes and blocks that interfere with your combat tactics though, because once you clear away a set number of stationary targets, the game rewards you with a power-up that drifts down the center of the screen as you advance. Grab that icon and you'll upgrade your ship to move faster, fire twin shots, and eventually piercing lasers, and acquire those aforementioned trailing laser bits. Your ship starts out sluggish and weak, but once you've collected a few power-ups, you zip around the screen and absolutely bristle with destructive capabilities that can practically clear away enemy formations the instant they appear. Of course, this also bears another similarity to Gradius. When you die, you lose all of your power-ups, and your ship resets to its default capabilities upon respawning. Depending on which checkpoint you revert to, this may amount to the effective end of your game, as it can be difficult to survive certain enemy formations with your slow, weak, basic ship, and you can't restore your upgrades until you reach one of the space-based structures where you can blast away its destructible installations. However, if you manage to hang onto your power-ups, you can pretty much clear the game in a breeze. This becomes an even easier proposition with the help of, yes, the Sega Sports Pad. Using the standard game controller, Astro Warrior can be pretty tough. Your slow rate of fire demands constant button mashing, and once you reach the second stage, your enemies fire thick patterns of bullets from all directions and leave little room for evasion. With the Sports Pad, however, you can set the auto-fire switch to turbo mode and fill the screen with lasers. Better yet, the trackball allows pixel-precise maneuvering in all directions, allowing you to edge past enemy bullets and steer deftly through throngs of foes programmed to zip aggressively in distracting patterns in an attempt to smash into you. In fact, I'd go so far as to say that the Sports Pad makes this the easiest game we've yet seen on Master System. It doesn't exactly trivialize the bad guys, because each new wave introduces new behaviors or bullet patterns that absolutely will catch you unawares the first time. But it certainly gives you a leg up and reinforces just how brief the entire game actually is. The game's 3 bosses prove surprisingly simple to take down with a fully powered ship, and despite the power-up system's similarities to Gradius, you don't have the sort of agency over your upgrades as in that game. You earn power-ups in a fixed order, and if you miss one as it drifts down the screen, well, that's it, and maybe you'll have better luck next life. In fact, with just 3 stages that loop indefinitely, as hinted at by the strange "surely revive" message you receive after defeating a boss, Astro Warrior seems almost like a glorified SG-1000 title. Like a game that should have shipped on a Sega card. It never did, but Sega did seem to recognize its brevity, as they combined it with Hang-On to create an alternate combo cart for kids who didn't want a light phaser. This combo shipped with certain console configurations in both the US and Europe. Contemporary publication Computer Entertainer magazine suggests that it shipped with the Sega base system sometime in 1986, which means that Astro Warrior might actually have been technically a launch title, although it's hard to say since Sega released many system configurations over the years, the timing of which is poorly documented online. In any case, the standalone Astro Warrior cartridge shipped in December, and while it's not exactly the most amazing game ever released, it plays well, it looks and sounds good, and, not unlike Star Force, ultimately exists as a test of score-chasing skills. Considering how rare proper shooters were in the US console market at this time, it stands out just on the strength of novelty. Another respectable, if slight, entry for the Master System. Next time on Segaiden, Sega gets sly.